There is a stretch of Interstate 80 west of Elko, Nevada, where the landscape looks like every other stretch of Interstate 80 in the state. Sagebrush, brown hills, a truck stop, a rail line, a river too shallow to bother naming if you didn't already know it was there. Ordinary, empty, completely unremarkable. Except in the hills north of that highway sits a corridor of ground roughly 40 miles long and 5 miles wide that has produced more gold than any other piece of land in North America. More than the Klondike. More than the Black Hills. More, by a comfortable margin, than every creek, gulch, and hydraulic pit of the California gold rush put together. And it is still producing. Right now, this morning, in 2026, under lights, on a shift schedule that has not stopped in 60 years. That is not the strange part. The strange part is that for more than a century, people walked directly over it. Prospectors camped on it. The wagon trains of 1849 followed the Humboldt River straight through the middle of it, chasing rumors of a strike 1,000 miles west, and nobody on those wagons noticed a thing. Because the gold under their boots was invisible, not buried deep, not hidden behind a ridge. Invisible, locked in the rock in particles so small you could line up 100 of them across the width of a human hair and still have room left over. Nobody found it until 1961. And when 2 Newmont geologists finally did, they didn't find it by looking at the ground. They found it by reading a paper. So how does the richest gold ground on the continent stay hidden for 100 years in the most heavily prospected state in the country? And what does it actually add up to, now that somebody finally knows how to look? Nevada was never supposed to be a gold state. Nevada was a silver state, and it knew exactly when it became one. 1859, the Comstock lode struck in the hills above what is now Virginia City. For 20 years, it ran the state, built cities out of nothing, funded a good part of San Francisco, and gave Nevada an identity so complete, the state motto might as well have been an assay report. Silver in the mountains. Gold, if you wanted gold, was in California. And so, Nevada got walked. Every canyon, every wash, every outcrop that showed a stain of color was staked, sampled, and argued over by men who did this for a living and were good at it. By 1900, the assumption was simple. If there were a major gold deposit here, somebody would have tripped over it decades ago. The assumption was reasonable. It was also built on a technique 5,000 years old. Every method of finding gold humanity had ever developed, panning a creek, tracing float uphill, following a quartz vein into a hillside, depends on gold announcing itself. A nugget in a pan, a glint in a fracture, a wire of metal in white quartz. Prospecting is a discipline of seeing, and it works beautifully right up until the moment the gold declines to be seen. Nevada's gold declined. It sat in flat gray limestone no prospector would look at twice, in concentrations of a few parts per million, bound into crystals of iron sulfide, too small to resolve without equipment that had not been invented yet. A man could hold $100 of ore in his palm and throw it away as worthless rock, and thousands of men did. Some of them were standing on top of what is now one of the largest gold mines on Earth. Then the rest of it fell apart. The Comstock played out in the 1880s, and Nevada emptied. Towns that had run electric streetlights and opera houses went dark inside a decade. The state's population collapsed by more than a third. Boomtowns became the ghost towns tourists photograph today. And by mid-century, Nevada mining was a memory that mostly appeared in movies, a worked-out piece of desert whose big story had already happened. By any reasonable measure, there was nothing left in Nevada to find. it did not end there. Because in 1960, a United States Geological Survey geologist named Ralph Roberts published a paper that was not about gold. Roberts had spent years mapping the Roberts Mountains thrust, an enormous sheet of deep ocean rock shoved eastward over northern Nevada hundreds of millions of years earlier, burying the older limestone underneath. In a few places, erosion had cut holes through that sheet, exposing the buried rock below. Geologists call those holes windows. Roberts mapped them and noticed what nobody had bothered to notice. Nevada's known mineral deposits were not scattered randomly. They clustered along the windows, in lines. It was a structural argument in a government bulletin, aimed at other geologists. Almost nobody in the industry acted on it. John Livermore did. Livermore was an exploration geologist for Newmont, circling an unfashionable idea for years that there might be gold in Nevada no prospector had ever found, precisely because no prospector could see it. Roberts had handed him a map of where to look. With Alan Coope, a geochemist who could run the sampling, Livermore went out to the Lynn Window north of the town of Carlin, and instead of looking for glints, they began assaying dull gray rock. In 1961, the numbers came back. The rock was full of gold, not veins, not nuggets. Gold spread evenly through the limestone in microscopic particles, disseminated, in the technical language, across a volume of rock so large the low grade stopped mattering. You could not mine it with a pick. You could mine it with a truck. Newmont opened the Carlin mine in 1965, and the industry watched it with the polite skepticism reserved for things that shouldn't work. Then the second deposit was found. Then the third. Then people understood that Carlin wasn't a mine. It was the exposed end of a mineralized corridor running southeast under the desert, and all of it was the same kind of gold. That required a new word. Geologists began calling them Carlin-type deposits, and the classification entered the global literature, which means a stretch of Nevada rangeland now defines an entire category of ore body worldwide. What followed was 40 years of the trend refusing to be finished. Every decade or so, someone with credentials announced the easy ground was gone. In 1986, Barrick took over a modest property called Gold Strike, drilled deeper into the sulfide ore beneath it, and turned it into one of the largest gold mines on Earth. In 2002, Cortez Hills. Years later, Gold Rush. The pattern held with almost irritating consistency. The trend was declared mature, and the trend produced again. What none of them fully understood, because the rock had not finished explaining itself, was why any of this was there in the first place. The gold in northern Nevada is younger than the rock that holds it, and the rock that holds it did not form in a desert. Start about 500 million years ago, on the western edge of an ancient North America that ended near present-day Utah. Everything past that edge was warm, shallow, tropical ocean, and for roughly 150 million years, that shelf did what carbonate shelves do. Lime mud, shell debris, and silt settling layer on layer until thousands of feet of limestone stood stacked on the continental margin. Then, around 350 million years ago, the ocean floor west of that shelf was driven up and over it. A vast slab of deep-water rock, hard, silica-rich, nearly impermeable, was thrust eastward across the limestone, sealing it under a lid. That lid is the reason any of this exists. Because far later, tens of millions of years ago, hot fluid began rising through the deep crust beneath Nevada, carrying gold in solution. It hit the impermeable sheet and had nowhere to go but sideways, spreading through the porous limestone underneath, dissolving it, reacting with the iron already in the rock. And here is what happened down there. The gold did not arrive as gold. It arrived dissolved in water, and it came out of solution atom by atom, plating itself onto the outer rims of microscopic pyrite crystals as they grew. Not a vein, not a nugget. A chemical stain applied across billions of tons of rock, then buried, then broken apart by the faulting that lifted Nevada's mountain ranges and dropped its valleys between them. The gold of the Carlin Trend was never a nugget waiting to be found. It could never have been found the way gold had been found for 5,000 years, because it was never that kind of object. It is closer to a rust than a rock, and the only tool that could ever have located it was a chemical assay pointed at ground that looked like nothing at all. For most of the 20th century, nobody was pointing one. That changed after 1961, and it has not stopped changing since. What grew on the trend became the most concentrated gold-producing district in the Western Hemisphere. In 2019, Barrick and Newmont, the two largest gold companies in the world and long-standing rivals, folded their Nevada operations into a single joint venture rather than keep competing over the same ground. Open pits, hundreds of feet deep, now sit within sight of underground workings following or down past a mile. The numbers are the part that stops people. By 2002, the Carlin Trend had produced over 50 million ounces of gold from 26 separate mines. Counting what has already come out, plus what remains in known reserves, the Trend's total endowment runs past 107 million ounces, figures documented by the Nevada Bureau of Mines and Geology and studied for decades by the USGS. Run that against anything close to today's gold price, and you land somewhere past $250 billion. That is a hard number to feel, so here is what it looks like. 107 million ounces is roughly 3,300 tons of gold, about as much as Germany holds in its entire national reserve, the second largest sovereign gold stockpile on the planet, the whole of it accumulated over a century and a half by one of the largest economies in the world. Nevada has that much in a strip of ground you could drive the length of in under an hour. And it is worth being honest about what that figure is. It is metal in the ground, not money in a vault. Half of it has already been dug and sold, most of that at prices a fraction of today's, and the rest still has to be paid for in diesel, permits, and 20 more years of work. But as a measure of what one misread stretch of gray limestone was actually holding, the number holds. None of it shows up from the interstate. From the road there is sagebrush, brown hills, a truck stop, a rail line, and nothing that looks like $250 billion. And unlike the Haley deposit in South Carolina, where the gold was known for 2 centuries and simply lost its place in the story the region told about itself, nothing was forgotten here. The Carlin Trend was never mislaid by history, because history never had it. What hid it was narrower and stranger. It was a definition. For 5,000 years, the word gold carried a built-in assumption about what the thing looked like, that it glinted, that a trained eye could catch it in a pan of gravel. That assumption was correct essentially every time it was tested, which is exactly what made it dangerous. The most productive gold ground on the continent went unnoticed by generations of skilled professionals, not because it was inaccessible, but because it did not match the picture in their heads. Nevada's gold didn't hide behind a mountain. It hid behind the word. That word was worth $250 billion. So what does a discovery that size actually mean, beyond the number? It means that the moment the definition changed, the map changed with it. Carlin-type deposits are now recognized and mined well outside Nevada, most significantly in southern China, where a comparable district was identified only after Nevada taught the world what to look for. An entire class of ore body existed on this planet in enormous quantities and stayed functionally invisible until 2 geologists in 1961 stopped looking for gold and started looking for the rock that gold hides in. That has always been the pattern here. Ralph Roberts was not hunting for a mine. He was mapping a thrust fault. John Livermore was not chasing a glint. He was chasing an idea about what could be there without showing. Alan Coope was running chemistry on stone. Every prospector in Nevada history had walked past and correctly identified as ordinary limestone. And the men who covered this state for 100 years and found nothing were not careless, and they were not unlucky. They were using the only method anyone had, and the method could not see what was there. The gold of the Carlin Trend survived the wagon trains crossing over it, the entire Comstock boom looking the other way, a century of the most intensive prospecting in American history, and a definition of its own name that made it unfindable. And it is still there, still coming out of the ground, in quantities nobody in 1900 would have believed of a state everyone had written off. Nevada was never supposed to be the answer. Nobody put it at the top of the list. But north of the interstate, past the truck stop and the rail line and the sagebrush, in flat gray rock that looks like nothing at all, $250 billion that arrived one atom at a time is still exactly where it settled. The only question was ever whether anyone knew what they were looking at. This channel exists for exactly this, the things that were never hidden at all, just misfiled, sitting in plain sight until somebody asked a better question. If that's your kind of story, subscribe to Geoscope.